what I'm going to be doing is the basic introduction to the product from a high-level overview, so we're not going to really drill down to the nitty-gritty either from a technical side or a sales side. Just get a good introduction and feel what the product does, what the benefits are, how customers use it, so on and so forth. So I like to kind of keep it short and sweet. But if there are any questions at any point in time, or there's anything you're interested in, or really anything that comes to mind, feel free to stop me and I'd be more than happy to jump into it. So yeah, I guess now would be a good time to get started. So what is 8man? What is it that we do here? As I mentioned earlier, so the company is Protected Networks and the solution is 8man. 8man is an access rights management solution for your Active Directory, file server, SharePoint, and Exchange. Basically what it does is it shows you who has access to a resource in a clear and concise manner, how they have access to that resource. It starts to help you answer the question who should have access to that resource, and then we follow that up with lots of automated and structured administrative capabilities, as well as the ability to run a wide range of reports and even logging of activity. So just to kind of start off a little bit, I always throw these out there to kind of get warmed up, to kind of introduce the topic a little bit. So 80% of data loss is coming from within any sort of given company or organization. So it could be something malicious. It could oftentimes be someone accidentally dropping a folder somewhere and not realizing where they put it. But also what we see is that access to data is unstructured. So when you start off as an organization, you start to build your Active Directory, it just kind of grows organically over time and a lot of problems start to crop up. So things like nested groups, groups and recursions, legacy users who've stayed with any organization for a long time tend to cause all these problems. So at the end of the day, what you have generally are a lot of users who have access to things they shouldn't have access to. So that opens you up to a wide range of threats and vulnerabilities, and that's where we come in. So what we do is we offer a complete 360-degree transparent overview of your Active Directory, of your access rights, of your file server, to allow you to restrict access to a need-to-know, need-to-have basis. That's the kind of fundamental aspect of 8man. And the idea is to protect information at its source. So a little bit more concretely, what we're taking a look at again is this idea of transparency. It's taking something that's really needlessly complicating it, complicated and simplifying it to its real base essence and giving users actionable intelligence that they need to make decisions. And this is often a building block for various compliance measures, which is a big reason why a lot of customers take a look at this in the first place. But we also document all changes. We can also log to have a nice transparent overview of not how your environment exists, but how it's also changing. So again, it goes back to this principle of reducing risk by reducing access to a need-to-know, need-to-have basis, but it's also things such as a little bit of a risk analysis, visualizing problems and structural issues immediately to make you some quick fixes. So most important though is this topic of efficiency. So what we see a lot is that customers want to do things in the correct way. They want to have a secure environment, but the second that becomes inefficient or becomes unsustainable, they drop it. So what we want to do is we want to speed up the process of compliance measures, of managing your Active Directory, managing access rights to save people time and money in a measurable fashion, whether that's through reducing the amount of time it takes to administrate something, reducing the amount of time it takes to run a report. That is what we really want to focus on. Last but not least, we want to focus on doing things in instituting best practice and best policies. So that could be automating certain tasks, but it's also delegating out responsibility to people involved. All right. So I like to show this slide just to kind of get behind the basic principle of 8man, kind of show the ethos, or I guess you can say the philosophy of the solution. We're just going to take a basic use case, and we have a folder on the file server, and we want to simply find out, okay, who has access to this folder. So normally you'd have to drill through some tabs until you get to this permission tab. And all that it shows you are all the groups who have access to this folder through one path or another. What it's not showing you are the nested groups, the group members, things of that nature. So to make a long story short, with native tools and with a lot of tools available on the market, you only get half of the picture. So what 8-Man does is it takes this information and displays it in a format that's easier to understand, easier to use. So over here we have the various NTFS permissions. So you can see, for example, who has modify rights, which groups have full control. You can see the group members listed there. You can see nested groups, so on and so forth. All right. So just a quick technology breakdown so we kind of have an idea of what we're going to be talking about here, and a little bit about licensing and a little bit more about the functionality. Standard capabilities for 8-Man are always for Active Directory and file server. Those technologies are always supported. Now, the product comes, or the base product comes in two different versions. There is a version called 8-Man Visor, which you can think of it as like 8-Man Lite. It's read and reporting only. So this is actually preferred in the larger environments. They want to get the visibility, they want to get the reports, but they often have some sort of change management system in place. What is more popular actually with a lot of our customers is the second version of the product called 8-Man Enterprise, which is read, reporting, and then administration, so you can make all those changes. So that's good. Once you've kind of found that out, customers then have the ability to expand to do two different technologies, SharePoint or Exchange, including SharePoint Online and Exchange Online. And what those do is they bolt on to the 8-Man base product and bring that functionality, the 8-Man functionality, out to SharePoint or Exchange. And then on top of that, we have three different add-ons called 8Mates. And what these do is they add various functionalities. So the first one is called GrantMa. It stands for Grant Me Access. I didn't make up the name. And what it does is it allows users to request access to something or to request account creation. So it's a web portal where users can make requests. And then in addition to that, we have the file server as well as the Active Directory logger. And both of those two technologies track activity on the file server as well as the Active Directory. So once you've kind of started talking to a customer, you can start to understand how our licensing model works a little bit. So we license the product based on what we call biological users. All that really is just an employee who has an Active Directory account. We do not charge for multiple accounts. We do not charge for service accounts. So once you have that number, you can start to work with the customer and say, okay, do they want Visor, Enterprise? Do they want to add SharePoint or Exchange? Do they want to add any of the 8-Mates, so on and so forth? And that's how you would get an offer for us, from us. All right. So real quick before we jump into the product, just a little bit about the companies who trust 8-Man and who use 8-Man, who really take a look at it. So we just have these names on really to show that there isn't a limit really to who could use 8-Man. It's really any customer that has problems with their Active Directory, which is 99% of organizations out there, and then any customer who has a reason why they need to fix it, whether that is a compliance need, whether it is protection of intellectual property, whether it's just a need to clean up the AD for security reasons. These are the reasons why people take a look at it. I would say, I don't know, maybe 70 to 80% of our customers buy for compliance need. It's a big topic, whether it's GDPR, ISO compliance, doesn't really matter. That's what they look for. So we're not really restricted by vertical. We have customers in all sectors of the economy. We have customers of all shapes and sizes. So our smallest customer has about 35 users, and our largest customer has 300,000. Now that being said, the average customer, or the range of customer size, I should say, starts around the 100 user mark, because that's where these Active Directory problems really start to come into effect, and then goes up to the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 range. That's really the range that we're looking at. Our customers take a big interest in it and are the easiest wins and are the best ones to really go about with 8-Man. But again, we're not really restricted in that sense. Okay. So a little bit about the 8-Man architecture, just so we have an idea of how to install it and how to do anything like that. It's a very, very easy product to install, configure, and maintain. All you need is an application server, a SQL database, and a service account. 8-Man sits on top of the service account, writes that information to the SQL database, and displays it in our user interface on the application server. Now we get a million questions from customers regarding performance, regarding loads on server, so on and so forth. It's very rarely a problem with 8-Man unless it's an extreme case by a customer site. One of the things is the product's very lightweight and powerful, so that's always something that's good. So on that note, I think we should just jump into it. So the way I always introduce 8-Man to potential partners and to customers is just kind of pretend that you were an end user, and I was going through the presentation in that way, just so we can start walking through some of the use cases for 8-Man. So let's fire it up. So user's going to log on and they are taken to the 8-Man home page. So instead of having to dig through tabs or use those kind of clunky native tools, they have this nice user interface. Instead of digging through property tabs, we have a simple search bar. So as simple as if you want to take a look at something, type in the first few letters of that object. So if it's a folder, if it's a mailbox, it's a user, doesn't matter. A list is populated. You click on that to get some more information. All right. This row right here, the different 8-Man functionalities we'll be walking through right now. And then what else we have on the home page, this big section here, are just different shortcuts. So on the right-hand side, we have all the different types of reports that you can run. A general rule of thumb is if you can see something with 8-Man, if you can do something with 8-Man, you can create a report for it. On the left-hand side of things, we have some more reports. And then we have some things like the ability to create new users, new groups, and other administrative shortcuts. So all this is a simple template. So instead of having to create a new user and go through that process, you just put in the name. You can edit the LDAP attributes. You can start assigning access rights based on roles. In this case, we have some templates set up. So you say everyone in the finance department needs access to X, Y, and Z. Upon account creation, they'll get access to those resources. You can set an activation date as well as an expiration date, create a mailbox, but what I want to focus on is down here in this comment field, and that is because every single change made with 8-Man requires a comment of some sort. And what we're going to do is we're going to track all of those changes so you can see who's making a change, what type of change is being made, when, and then why. So no matter who's making those changes, you can always go back and say, okay, this user was deleted at this point in time, and start to get an audit record of what changes are going on in the environment. All right. I think the logical place to start off was going to be the dashboard, just to get a general overview of what we're dealing with here. So a lot of customers like to start off with this so they can get an idea of their environment. So for example, on the right-hand side, we have some basic statistical information, so number of users, number of administrative accounts. If any of those accounts have been disabled, you can take a look at those. We have a breakdown of all of our different types of groups. So we have empty groups, groups in recursion, so on and so forth. And then we have some stuff such as your top 5 users by Kerberos token. So these are your most privileged users, and they can see quickly, okay, this person isn't an admin, so they shouldn't have access to all these things. And then you have your top 5 holders log on, so they can say, okay, this account hasn't logged on for 4 years. We're pretty safe to go ahead and delete it. On the left-hand side of the screen, what we have are a series of standardized reports. So things like inactive accounts, various user and group reports, but also reports that users can run after the first scan has been run and show where do users have direct access to something, where does everyone have access to unresolved SIDs in the file server, things of that nature. Things that need to be looked into, need to be investigated. All right. So back to the home page, what we're going to do right now is just walk through a couple of quick use cases. And the first one that a lot of customers are used is finding out, okay, who has access to a resource. So I'm going to take the finances folder on my file server, type in the first few letters of finances. All right. So over here on the left-hand side, we have all of our resources available. So you can see the AD, the file server, SharePoint, Exchange. all of the resources are navigated, they're administrated on, and they work in the same function. So the benefit being that customers don't have to switch between products or go back into the native tools. It's all in one single interface. All right. So over here, we have the screenshot from earlier, so I can open this up and I can see, okay, all of these groups have modify rights. Here are all the group members. Here's all the nested groups. I have a little comment field here, so I can take a look at all the changes that have occurred. Looks like this is a group. So yeah, so all the changes that have occurred within this group, so people being added, people being removed, or passwords being changed, so on and so forth. And then I have a flat list of all users who have access to this folder through one path or another. So I can click on any of these users and click on Gareth here. I see he has two different access paths. Here are the access paths listed out, so you can see exactly, okay, who has access to this folder. Now that's kind of step one. A lot of customers use a spreadsheet or they use really kind of clunky tools to get this information. But what we want to do from here is just flip the question on its head. So instead of taking a look at who has access to a folder, we want to reverse the query and say, okay, what does this user have access to? Or what does group membership grant access to? So you can get this off in a report. You can run this report, or you can just say show access rights to resources. The user pops up over here on the left-hand side. I can see everything he has access to. I can open up that file server again, and I can see, okay, he has access to the following folders and the following effective rights listed here. So you can go through and say, okay, he has just a couple clicks, you can see who has access to a folder, what a user has access to, or what group membership grants access to. So that's kind of the basic use case. Get a nice overview of your access rights situation, just a couple clicks. So before I move on to a little bit about administration and Active Directory group structure, are there any questions so far?
No, none from me.
Really?
No, it looks good.
All right then. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is Active Directory group structure, really the root of a lot of these problems. I'm just going to right click on the user and go show in accounts view, and my user account pops up in our Active Directory bubble graph. And what we're seeing are all the groups that this user is a direct member of. I can do a couple other things. I can find a different user, and I can see, okay, what does this user have access to? And then I can keep clicking on all these little tabs, and I start to see the Active Directory group structure as it exists in this environment. So this is actually not too bad. There's only not too bad. The nesting is only 3 deep. There aren't any redundant group memberships, so this is okay. But then you go and you try to identify a problem user or a lot of nested groups. And this is where the benefit comes from, because what we're going to be able to start seeing is that we're going to have some nested groups that give a lot of access to different things. So I can open this user here, and I can see, okay, what else do they have access to? And then we can start to see some redundant group memberships. We can start to see extra layers being added onto it. So this is where a lot of the problems our customers have come, where they stem from this kind of chaotic Active Directory group structure. So all we're going to do is start administrating. I'm going to remove this user from a group. You also have full administrative capabilities, delete the account, reset the password, all that kind of good stuff. I'm going to go change group memberships. I'll pull them out of the Salesforce group. You can also set an expiration date. So you say this date and time, pull the user out, add your comment, and hit apply. So then what you can also do is set up so users are never able to make a change. They're only able to request a change. And then that request is sent off to whomever is responsible for approval. All right, cool. So the change has been made immediately. He's been moved out of that group, and therefore has his access rights revoked. Now, another way to take a look at this problem, and I think one of the easier ways to show the real benefit of 8-man, is we're going to take a different folder. We'll take the R&D folder here, and all we're going to do is give a user rights. So we're going to give, who do I have here? I'll just take Andrew because he's here, and drag and drop into the read column. So all I have to think about is, okay, what does this user need? And hit apply. So what 8-man's doing right now is making a quick analysis and saying, okay, is there a group that exists that gives read rights to the R&D folder? If so, it's just going to put the user in that group. If no group exists, though, 8-man's going to go through the process of creating a group, giving that group a name based on a naming convention that you can define, setting the rights to that group, and putting the user in that group. The basic principle behind it is that you as the user only have to think about the end result. So this user needs access to this. And 8-man's going to take care of the other steps behind it. So essentially reducing a 4-step process into a 1-step process. That is really the benefit that we're getting here. You can always turn this off. The reverse process also works. So if you want to remove a user from the group and it creates an empty group, 8-man's going to go through the process of going through revoking the rights and deleting that group. All right. So one last kind of key bit before we jump into reporting and call it a day for the demonstration is just our logbook. So as I mentioned earlier, we track all changes made with 8-man. Today, there's been a total of 2 different changes that have been made. So I can go here, I can see that a group membership has been edited. I have a timestamp, I have an author and a comment. And then down here, I have a full description of the change. So I can go through and see, okay, this user is moved specifically in this group, so on and so forth. We also have a second comment here that has these 2 little tiny boot prints next to it. And those boot prints indicate that the comment was added by the AD logger. And what the AD logger does is it scans the AD event logs and displays any event here. So if someone's making a change with native tools, with another solution, or even with 8-man itself, we're still going to capture that event. The idea behind it is that we have a full 100% auto log of all activity, including on the AD. The file server logger works more or less along the same principle. It acts, I like to think of it almost like a little security camera that sits on top of file server. It records activity. And then what you do is you run a report and you say, show me everyone who's made changes to files within this folder in the last week. It spits out that report and then you use that. These 2, the AD and the file server logger, are our most popular add-ons. They're really the ones that a lot of customers like to use. All right. Cool. So the last bit that we're going to run through is recertification and grant mom. But before we do that, what we used to do is a big problem that our customers had wasn't finding out who has access to something. It's who should have access to something. This report. Yep. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So they're trying to figure out, okay, who should have access to this resource. So the main problem behind that is that the IT team, the people who would know this information, who would be able to get it from the Active Directory, aren't going to be knowing the people in the finances department, for example. So what we used to recommend is that people would generate a report every day, week, month, what have you, automatically, attach it in an email, and send it out. So this can all be taken care of automatically. We're just going to run a report so you can see what it looks like. All right, there we go. All right, we'll take a quick look at the report. So basically a user, so let's say data owner in this case, the head of finance, would get this report and the IT team would ask for feedback. So they say, okay, you know, this user left the company, this user shouldn't have access, this user was a consultant, and so on and so forth. Take that information, feed it back to the IT team, and they would make some changes. And that's good, but it added some kind of extra complicated steps. So what we've done is we've created or we've added to our web portal something called recertification. And it takes this process of recertifying a user into a web portal. So a non-technical user, someone who doesn't have maybe necessarily good knowledge of Active Directory, they can log on using their Active Directory credentials. This person has been given charge of 2 different folders. So in this case, the marketing folder. So we have the marketing folder here. We have our accounts here. And all they do is they say, okay, these 3 users, they should have access. They add their comment and hit assign action. So what's going to happen is that this action is going to be stored in the comment section. So you can see at this date and time, these users were approved. They should have access to this folder by this person. On the flip side of that, if you say remove the access rights, it's going to trigger an event that has an IT admin coming and taking a look at it and revoking the access rights. And again, all that's going to be a tracked. So you can see, okay, these users were decertified on this date and time, removed by this user, or these users were recertified at this point in time. And so that is a big compliance reason why a lot of people need to do that. Sometimes it's a yearly thing they have to do. All right. So the last bit before we're done kind of with the high-level demo is just a little bit about Grandma. So Grandma, again, is this web portal where users can make requests. It can be things such as requesting a new group or new users created, or requesting access to a resource, so on and so forth. So a user's going to go on, they're going to ask for read rights to the SharePoint portal. Oops, there's two of them. And they say, okay, I need read rights to this. They go to their shopping cart and they can request access for themselves, or they can request access for other people. So it's a way of delegating out control to various resources to other people. Then you set up a workflow, so then someone can make the change immediately, someone then has to approve the change, or someone has to approve the change, and then yet another person has to come in and accept the change. Okay, so that is really kind of a high-level overview of 8-Man. There's a lot that we kind of skipped over. There's a lot more we can go at, but I think it's a good time to call it quits for the demo and see if you have any questions or anything you'd like to know more detail, anything you're missed out.
Yeah, that's a lot of information. I've got to admit, it's great. A couple of questions I've got concerning the product. As you know, we are a information security consultancy, so we spend a lot of time doing PCI-related ISO 27001, HIPAA, and numerous other regulatory requirements for companies. So I'm interested from that side of it. Does your system have certification process within it to show, adherence to certain things, or is it just a case of you follow those things but you really don't have an assurance process built in?
So would it be in the sense that if you have a PCI project with a customer, we have various things to say, we're checking and we've checked and see this customer is PCI compliant or for this section. Is that kind of what you're looking for? No, we don't.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay. No, we don't have that directly. What we do have is essentially the compliance standards for PCI, for example. I think they're called chapters. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we have them mapped out. So you say, okay, this is the standard laid down by PCI. This is how you solve that standard with 8-Man. This is what you need to use. This is the function and feature you need to use. So we don't have that button here. It takes an extra step where you have to say, okay, we have to map it that way, but all the reports will be considered audit-proof and acceptable for compliance standards.
Okay, that's interesting. What other mappings do you have? Do you have a set list of standards that you map to?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, we have PCI, ISO 27001. We had, what was it called? PSN compliance for the public sector. SOX compliance, and then the one we're working on right now is GDPR. Those are the ones off the top of my head.
Okay. Interesting as well, you were talking about access and the fact that people, they are set up with access rights with non-renewal of passwords. Is it capable to change that across an entire set from this product?
So that's one thing I didn't cover. So we have a little, this is actually pretty new, something called Analyze and Act. And what we have here are various scenarios you can run. So in this case, we have all accounts for passwords that never expire. So we start the calculation. And then what you can do is you get a list of all these users. So this is not the best example because these are mostly service accounts. But you can select all of them. You can reset the passwords. You can change the password options. You can deactivate. You can delete the accounts. And what we're going to be doing actually in the next version is coming out with more and more scenarios so you can run that and make your bulk changes as necessary.
How does this work then with forensics? in terms of incidents, because this is a powerful tool, isn't it? And can, and with anything that's powerful, it can be used for good and it can be used for evil.
Yeah, so when it comes to forensics, really that's going to be, there's two things that we're going to take a look at. We're going to be taking a look at the Active Directory and the file server logger primarily. So essentially here's a report, for example. I'm looking at all the members that have been removed from groups, in this case the whole domain, but you can also narrow it down by OUs. And then you're looking for event authors. So you get that list of reports saying these members were removed from these groups at this date and time by this user, right? File server logger, again, looks more or less the same thing, but for file activity, so who's going through and deleting stuff. And that's the way you can go and see if there's an incident and go back and see, okay, how did this incident occur?
Yeah, that's not actually forensic level, is it? This couldn't be used in court for information, for instance.
Ooh, I really don't know if it could be used in court, actually. Um,
Question for you, I mean, because that's
yeah.
an important piece for a lot of companies.
Hmm.
Um, Actually, on that, I don't know if you might have covered it. I don't know already. But so the logs for this itself, 8-man,
Mm-hmm.
where I mean, where are they stored, etc. Because that is going down the forensics route. Because at the end of the day, you go straight for the logs, not going through the actual product itself.
Right. The logs that the product uses to generate the reports are going to be stored on the SQL database.
Okay.
So the file server logger, it takes the information basically from a collector and encrypts it and sends it to the SQL database. And then you're able to get the information output from here from the user interface, which pulls that information from the database.
Okay. I suppose for forensics, you use something like Encase to then analyze that. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
All right. Was there anything else that any questions that are open?
How easy is it to set this beast up?
Very easy. The biggest thing is just preparation of customer site. If they have the correct permissions on the service account, if they have the SQL database, if they have the application server, you can realistically do the basic installation configuration in about 15 to 20 minutes. The first scan, depending on size, it starts around 15 minutes, can go to an hour, 2 hours. On really large customer sites, it's going to take 4 hours. But once you have that first scan, it's from that point in time more or less self-sufficient.
Is there any detrimental effect on the companies while that is scanning?
Yeah, if you're scanning, you may see a slowdown on certain things for responses on file servers, maybe when it comes to logging into Active Directory. But the product is set up to scan every day at 10 o'clock, so generally outside of working hours. The first scan is really the scan that you're going to see any, if major, performance issues. Every other scan after that, you may see some, but it would depend on how active the environment is, really.
Yeah. Controlling the controllers. This is, going back to my original point about the fact that it's been a very powerful tool. How do you ensure that the admin guys are under control? Is there
So
any double checks you can do?
yeah, it's kind of the who watches the watchman type thing.
Yeah.
So there's a couple ways you can go about it. So I'm guessing from the forensics things, there it might be some issues you can worry about by people going to database, and there's the way that we go about it is we basically divide up admins into two different types of admins. You have your full admins who at the end of the day you kind of just have to trust to a certain extent, and then you have your junior or your less privileged admins. And what we allow you to do is we allow you to restrict what those admins can see and do either within 8-man or Active Directory. So you can basically make sure that they don't have full control over everything. Now, if someone's a full domain admin, they're a full domain admin, they have full domain admin rights, but you can restrict it, and you can
Well,
log their activity.
can they delete their activities? Their activities will be logged, won't they?
Yeah, so the only way they could really delete their activities is if they go into the SQL database and delete the logs, and then you'll be able to see that the logs have been deleted.
Yeah, I'm just thinking if I was attacking a company, this is the tool I would be attacking. I would
Yeah.
try to hack this tool and then cover up my activities once I've used it for the use that I need it for.
Yeah, so
I'm not necessarily thinking of the admin, I'm thinking of access from someone who should not have access to this tool.
okay. So now that's a different topic then. So that's a bit interesting because what we could do is essentially what you do is you define everyone who needs access to it and you put it in a group, and all you have to do is set an alarm or an alert on that group. So this is saying if group membership is changed or passwords are reset or accounts been unlocked, someone gets an alert automatically as an email. So you'll be able to see basically when users are given privileges they're not supposed to via a group. Um, in regards to the product itself, if they go and they turn off any of the logging, you'll be able to see that as well too. So that's how we would protect itself from or be able to see when someone is interfering with the logging of the tool. So you'd see gaps in the log or you see that someone actually went through and turned the logging off.
Okay. With something like this, obviously you've got quite a few clients, quite some nice juicy clients at that. What are the general things you find that are frustrating towards the clients and things you're trying to improve in that sense? It's always good to know what they don't like about it as well as what they do like about it.
What they don't like about the software?
Yeah, what's their frustrations? Is there anything in particular we need to be aware of from that perspective? If we were selling this product, obviously we would want to be sure that we were covered for there may be one or two things. All software is similar. They always have something that it's too slow to scan, there's always a couple of bugs or frustrations that companies have with the software that they expect it to do more than it can.
Mm-hmm. So I would say the primary one is focused around file server logging because what a lot of our customers want is they want a report on what a specific user has done. And we can get that information, but it requires you to filter out some pieces, and they don't like to go through it. A second thing that
It's quite a big one, that one, isn't it?
yeah, that's the biggest one, and I'm hoping that comes this year. The second one I would say that we get probably the most feedback on is that we don't take a deep look at the file level. So some customers want to say, show me where, for example, where all the credit card numbers are stored on the file server. We don't handle that. It's something that falls outside of our purview. And last, some customers want a software that says, show me all the recommendations and automatically remove users from group X, Y, and Z if it meets criteria A, B, C. Some of these comments are valid, particularly the one around the file usage from a particular user. The other ones, I think sometimes customers are looking for magic bullets, but I would say those are the three ones off the top of my head that I hear the most.
Yeah, and that would make sense because you kind of fall between the e-discovery kind of digital guardian product and the kind of DLP product at the other side of it, I guess, in terms of you're sitting somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
Would you say?
Yeah, definitely so, because we're not data loss prevention. We're not kind of this broad discovery tool either. So we're our own little product.
Yep. Okay. I don't think I have any more questions. Ian, Sphere, any questions?
Helps if I turn myself on mute and start whittling.
Yeah, I was struggling.
I suppose costing at the end of the day, that's a big one. I mean, how do you do your costing? I know you said it's biological users, etc., but do you have like a sliding scale? So for say above 1,000, blah, it slides down. So can you give us an example?
Yeah, so we basically have different bands of users. So I think it starts off at enterprise, something like £30 per user, and then every 8 made is something like £10 per user, and then essentially the more users they purchase for, the lower that cost sinks. We also have a band, I think it's under 150, where it's just a flat license. So they have to pay, whether depending on the product, a flat fee. And then once they go above the 150 user mark, then we start to calculate a price per user fee.
Okay. So what's the flat fee then?
For enterprise, it's 5,000.
Okay.
We just changed it, and I think it's either 100 or 150. I'd have to double check on that.
Yeah, that's good to know.
I think a lot of the pricing, as I sort of explained earlier, obviously there's been a bit of change. So Simon, the chap who's responsible for the chap that you met last week, Brian, he's kind of overview, he's just giving all of this a bit of a cleanse. So once we've got obviously what's been agreed, and obviously the exchange rate from the original prices we're working off in Germany, we can obviously get an up-to-date version of events out to you anyway. So all right.
Brilliant. That's it for me.
All right. Yeah, unless there's any questions, I think probably it's, I'd just like to thank everyone for jumping on the webinar today. There's a couple points I need to get back on to you guys, a couple questions to be answered, but if there's anything else, feel free to let Elliot or myself know. I'll be more than happy to help you out.
Wonderful.
We'll
Thank
catch
you,
up on
James.
Brian. Yeah. Sorry, Brian. You
Yeah,
go ahead.
definitely.
Sorry, I spoke over you then. Sorry.
That's all right. I'm just saying it was great. So it looks like a very interesting and exciting tool.
Yeah, great. So like Steve said, obviously, I think if obviously he was on the invite. So if you've got anything technical, maybe just direct it straight to him. And then obviously anything commercial in terms of pricing, etc., and so forth, I'll follow up with those bits. But obviously, if you've got anything other commercial-wise, you can throw those my way. And just like I say, copy Steve in because he may well know the answer as well. So, well, he will know the answer as well.
Okay. Well.
Right. Thanks for your time, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sophia. Thanks, Ian.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers, bye.
Cheers. Thanks, Steve. Bye.
Bye.